the time that we're in the time of democracies, people have been given the opportunity to vote. And this is in harmony with the prophecy of Daniel chapter 2, verse 41 through 43, the feet of iron and clay. So all over the world, you see these democracies, and people are given the opportunity now to choose their leaders, which was not really what most human history is about. So would this be a civic responsibility for Christians to engage in, to do this type of thing? Well, we know that as Nebuchadnezzar learned the lesson, that God is the ruler in the kingdom of mankind. He's the one that can intervenes whenever it is his purpose to exalt someone or to put someone, a ruler, down, whatever, however he wants to do it, whatever is to accomplish his purpose. And so Nebuchadnezzar learned that lesson, that really it's God who's in control of what happens in the kingdom of mankind. God can do whatever he wants to manipulate events for his purpose. So that's God's business. We don't get involved with God's business. He does as he pleases. We don't have any input on that. As Nebuchadnezzar learned, no one checks God's hand. He does what he wants to do. Jesus further said that his disciples would be no part of the world. Therefore, we don't get involved with the affairs of the world as far as as far as how they govern each other. We don't determine what type of government they're going to have. We just live under it. We submit to the superior authorities, as Romans 13 says. Doesn't mean that we do everything the superior authorities say, because if they're saying things that God says is wrong, then we don't obey that. As the apostle said, we obey God as ruler rather than man. Jesus said, give Caesar his things, but God's his things. Caesar never gets what belongs to God. Many people today, they look at the present United States administration and say, well, hey, we need to get some new people in here. We need to get salvation from one of these other human leaders. But the Bible shows that salvation does not come that particular way. Now, in 1 Timothy 3, it shows some of the qualifications of leadership. These are spirit given standards for leadership, for those who qualify for proper leadership in God's eyes. And so these are the standards, as 1 Timothy 3 says. This statement is trustworthy. If a man is reaching out to be an overseer, he is desirous of a fine work. The overseer should therefore be irreprehensible, a husband of one wife, moderate in habits, sound in mind, orderly, hospitable, qualified to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but reasonable, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money, a man presiding over his own household in a fine manner, having his children in subjection with all seriousness. For if any man does not know how to preside over his own household, how will he care for the congregation of God? Not a newly converted man, for fear that he might get puffed up with pride and fall into the judgment passed on the devil. Moreover, he should also have a fine testimony from outsiders, so that he does not fall into the reproach and a snare of the devil. So these are the qualifications of leadership that God approves of. And we know human leaders today, they don't fit these qualifications. They don't make it as far as these standards are concerned. In fact, in the United States, there really are not really moral standards to be a leader. They take into consideration your age, or you're a citizen of the United States. Even a felon could be a leader in the United States, can be the top person. So they don't really have any good standards as far as leadership. And so they would never match the standards for approved leadership by God. And so if we're voting for such ones, we already know going in they don't qualify. for good leadership. What does 1 Timothy 5:22 tell us? It says, "Never lay your hands hastily on any man, neither become a sharer in the sins of others. Keep yourself chaste." So laying on of hands was a matter of conveying responsibility to that person. And so we wouldn't want to do that hastily. And of course, the person, if we do, we could be a sharer in the sins of others. So here's the thing, that the concept that many people understand is that in the Bible, there is such a thing as community responsibility. There is such a thing as being responsible for someone else's sins, depending on what we've done. You know, like for instance, it talks about how if you give a welcome to a known apostate person and you associate with them, well, then you could become a sharer in their sins. Look back at the time of Moses with Dathan and Abiram. They were rebelling against God and his servant Moses. And Moses told them, everybody else, you need to get away from their tents or you're going to be swept away with them. And then we find in Revelation 18 a spiritual harlot. And the Bible documents what spiritual harlotry is all throughout it. And so in Revelation 18, we have this Babylon the Great, this large city limits of religious harlotry, that where you find them, they're with the kings of the earth. They're right there with them, influencing them to do what is wrong. And the Bible tells us that we have to get out of her or we'll share in her sins. And her sins involve that everyone on this earth has been killed by reason of her. So that's a large sin to have to be held accountable for because you didn't get out. So the understanding is there is community sin. In other words, you may not have personally done it, but if you don't get away from that, if you don't get away from any endorsement of that, you could be charged by God. Hosea 8:4, "They have appointed kings, but not through me. They have appointed princes, but I did not recognize them." So here they were appointing people that did not meet God's standards. And this was one of the reasons why God was bringing judgment against that northern tribe of Israel, of which Hosea was speaking against. So we already got to deal with, everyday life, trying to do what's right. But then if you're engaging in installing these people, another aspect is that God can now charge you with what they're doing. Because there's really no excuse, because you already know going in they don't meet the standards of rulership, of leadership that God has written down in the Bible. All these things they're doing, God can now tag that on you. And really you got into God's business of you're going to be the one to install and to bring down rulers. This is something that God reserves for himself, and you've got in that business. So now God can charge you with whatever they do. See, God uses them for a particular purpose, to accomplish his purpose. That's not your business. And so when we hear examples like people we hear of, like Watchtower people that were in Malawi back in the 70s, and they wouldn't buy the party card, they were being persecuted by a wicked regime because they wouldn't join in them in their low standard leadership because they didn't want to be tagged with what they were doing. Such a wicked regime, as many wicked regimes all over the earth, try to get everybody to, in a fake way, go along with the evil that they're doing. But these ones in Malawi, Watchtower people, even though they had things they were not teaching right, in that instance of not buying that party card, they were doing the right thing. They were not going to share in the sins of that political party. And so that was a fine example. So Christians today, we don't get involved with the politics as far as establishing rulers and things of this nature. That's not our business. We leave that to God. He deals with all that. Our trust is in God to handle that. Christians have already voted. Once they got baptized, they already voted. They voted for Christ as king. Christ has been king since he went back to heaven. He says, "I've received all authority in heaven and earth." He told the Laodicean congregation, Revelation 3:21, I have sat down on the throne of my Father. He's been high priest and king since he went back to heaven. So once people came into Christ, they were baptized, they put their vote in for Jesus Christ. Some might say, well, hey, if you don't have vote, you don't have any say or whatever. We don't have any guilt either. And one day when he returns, he will, as king, one of his actions that he will take, he will cause the earth to experience a great period of darkness that will signal that he is getting ready to take ownership of everything on this earth. And that means using the angels to uproot all these unqualified leaders off this earth and all those who have supported them. They will go through and uproot them. But those that maintain their vote for Jesus and never taint it with getting involved with these politics of the world, they will see how that vote will pay off and that they will enjoy the opportunity to see how the earth really will be when you have qualified leaders taking ownership and administering earth's affairs.